So no, it was the idea. Like the initial email says something like it's going to be huge and it's going to be overwhelming, and so you will have to keep it by your set that's by the fire, and it will take months to digest. And this is what we want to do, which I thought was a great idea.
Hi, welcome to the Dieku podcast. I am Gary Snow, and with me is Eric Nieudan, who is one half of the Merry Mushmen, and the other half being Olivier Revenu, who is not with us today, but I'm sure Eric is going to share a lot of the insights as both of their contributions to Knock Magazine, issues 1, 2, and 3. And Eric, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So Knock Magazine has, I think, in a very short order now, become like the go-to magazine for the OSR scene. And I know there's others, but I think people really have gravitated towards Knock as being something very special. And so you should be very proud of that achievement. And I want to talk to you all about the process of developing the magazine. But first of all, as always, we want to know a little bit about your history and your background and how you got into gaming in the first place.
All right, so we have to get back to the olden days, the early 80s. And I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. I was aware of Dungeons and Dragons through a box that I have with me here. But I guess, I'm sure you'll never guess which D&D box I started my journey with.
Did you start with the Moldvay?
Mm-hmm.
No,
I got the Moldvay just after that, but I'll show you because you'll never know. This thing, which is not the original, I tracked it on eBay like 20 years ago. It was still an old thing. It's a metal, the brand electronic game that was just using the D&D brand to have like a little maze warrior versus dragon thing. But that's the only way that's probably the only way I could have heard of Dungeons and Dragons, because in the 80s in France it was in wargaming magazines, and I was 11 at the time. But as soon as the Moldvay, the French version of the Moldvay box appeared in toy shops, I made sure I got one for, I don't know if it was a birthday or Christmas or something else. And yeah, that's how your nerd journey starts.
what was the culture like?
Friends. It was very interesting because very soon, I suppose it's probably like a national pride kind of thing in France when you see something that's so tied to writing. It had to be something that we could do and probably do better. Yeah. So translations appeared, but like as soon as I think 84. There were French games, some of them very D&D-like, some of them very, very different. And it's to this day, it's still happening. There's dozens of games being released by small to very small companies. Like we don't have any big publishers anymore, but it's still happening. Was it Asmodee, who you might know as being a huge international publisher of board games, started making role-playing games about being punks in the city.
Was it the same kind of, like when you watch like a TV show like Stranger Things or something like that, was it the same kind of thing where it's like a geeky group of kids that kind of got together? Or
yeah, I suppose so, because like your childhood friends, they play with you for a bit and then they want to do something else, but you don't. So you find other friends, and yeah, you find the freaks and the geeks in the school, and you stick together until you go to college and you find other freaks.
And so from those early days of playing with your friends, did you always aspire to make role-playing games yourselves or yourself?
No, I don't think so. You know, like everyone else, especially in those days, you had to make a lot of stuff yourself. But it started very late. I didn't realize I was a writer until I was in my late 20s, when I actually ended up working for a game publisher for whom I'd been translating Feng Shui, the first edition. So that was like 97, 98. And I ended up, they needed someone to be a line manager. And I said, yeah, I'll go across France, which, you know, it doesn't mean anything for our New World listeners and viewers, but to me at the time, crossing the tiny country of France across was a big move. I had to go in the east and in the north, where, you know, they have penguins and they probably still speak German. And that's when, yeah, I ended up putting more hands in the projects that we were making. There was a lot of translation. There was Oriflamme was the translator, and they were doing, they'd been doing Chaosium, like most of Chaosium lines except for Call of Cthulhu in translation. And the D20 boom happened, and we were like, yeah, let's do something D&D like. And I ended up being the lead writer on that, and meeting a lot of people, including Olivier at that time. So that's exactly 20 years ago. I checked the dates recently.
And have you stayed within the game industry this whole time, or do you have like a other career that's kind of been parallel with that?
No, I've been, I went to video games for 3 to 4 years, did very little development, and ended up at Goa, who were the European publishers of games like Dark Age of Camelot and the Warhammer MMO, whose names I can't remember at the moment. But that's what brought the whole company to Ireland, and also tanked the whole company. But I stayed.
And that's a really good time to mention that you're actually in Dublin, coming to us today. And so you've been there you went with the video game company, and then you've been there ever since.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it was a huge clusterfuck of investment of a lot of millions, and it didn't end well. Everyone was offered a job in because the company was owned by Orange, the big telco. So everyone was offered to go back to France and find a job there, and but I had met someone, and I didn't want to go back to Paris anyway. So I've been here, and I've been making games, writing novels that never sold, doing everything I could do with a keyboard, basically.
And did you learn a lot of lessons from like the video game industry that you brought towards? I guess you learn always, no matter what you're doing, but was there any skills that you kind of took from that world into role-playing games?
You get organizational, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Subtitle it, please. You get that kind of stuff. You get better at spending money properly, and being on time, and be less passive aggressive with people when they're late on their deadline, that kind of stuff. I'm still not very good at at that. I can't say we were doing a lot of editorial, like parallel content, so the websites and stuff like that. So we didn't do development or anything at that time. It's such a different medium anyway. I don't think there are a lot of lessons from video game play that we can use in role-playing games. They tried that with 4th edition of D&D, and we know the results.
And when did you get back into like or go into the OSR scene? When did you discover that? Because that seems to be the niche that you've kind of really cut your teeth into.
Yeah, I think it got its teeth into me instead. That must have been like 2012, 2013, before 2013, because I know I started working on games at that time. I had stopped for like 2-3 years to actually run and play games, but it didn't take for very long. So I started looking at what was online, and actually ended up doing more story games. I was more on the story games buzz. I remember James West, James West of Black Pudding fame, the OSR artist and designer. He's doing Gother on Kickstarter. He was there on that scene at that time, and I found a game that I really loved from him that was called The Pole, and hacked it and started sharing that. But somehow Dungeon World appeared. I was already playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game at the time, which was Monster of the Week, and Dungeon World appeared, and there was a French version that was a red box. So, nostalgia did its work, and I got into that, and from that I started looking at what the OSR or other people around the OSR were doing, and getting more and more nostalgic. I hacked a little GM-less dungeon exploring game that I called White Books, that was never released, but it's probably online still somewhere. And I think when I really understood what you could do with the OSR was into the odd, like the first, or even the pre-publishing edition, and then I was hooked, because you have 3 stats, you have hit points, and that's all you need, and it's going to force an experience that is not prescribed the way Powered by the Apocalypse does. It doesn't box you into the game, which works, but it's kind of a more free experience, and it will still induce a particular gameplay that I really enjoy.
And when did you come up with Macchiato Monsters in that journey? Because I really liked the game, and in your credits you often say you Into the Autumn is an influence, and then I also noticed there's a Dungeon and Sea, which was also another credit that you put there. But there's a lot of OSR games that you credited for that influence, and the White Hack and the Black Hack as well.
So I was running White Hack and really enjoying it. I liked the fact that you can come up with your own concept for characters and give them traits, and come up with spells. But David Black, so everyone was on Google Plus at the time, so it was like if you haven't been on Google Plus, you have no idea. It was a smorgasbord of everything gaming happening all the time, and you could just click and read the books, and click and be on a Zoom call like this one and start playing. It was like a lot of emulation, and so David Black appeared with his publishing Black Hack, and I was like, yeah, this is really good. This is much more simple. I don't have to remember where the traits go, etc., etc. So at the back of my White Hack notebook edition, I started copy and pasting, properly cut and pasting, I mean, bits from the PDF of that pre-release Black Hack, thinking it's going to take me a week, and then I'll have a cool game that I can play. It took me 3 years in the end. And it's called Macchiato Monsters because it had a little bit of white into the black. And since I didn't think that panda or zebra would be as nice, I mean, yeah, it's not a game about coffee, people, but it's a game that has monsters, and I think I put some coffee in the equipment list, so it counts.
Well, I really liked how you did the resourcing on the Macchiato Monsters, where like if the steps down and up that you could do that. That was I thought like a clever little mechanic that you added in it as well. Like if I look back upon that document, you can see some of the initial pieces of when I look at Knock Magazine and your contributions. I can kind of see like the precursor to some of your content that you've added to Knock Magazine over the years, just like the
of course
the primordial.
I haven't ran Macchiato Monsters in like probably 2 years, but I remind myself every time I run something to have it in my bag, because those tables that I wrote for, exploration and harvesting food on the way and weather and stuff like that, they're there. I don't need to come up with a new system or take someone else's, since this one works since I wrote it. But the rest die, the resource that you're talking about, I stole that from David in the Black Hack. I just changed the probability to make it
one of my favorite
easier to lose stuff.
One of my favorite things is the table that something always happens on at camp, because there's nothing to me more disappointing than when you roll something random when you're in camp and just nothing happens, and you're like, well, why did we go through the whole process of having a camp if nothing happens? You
could just fade to black next day.
Yeah.
Remind us what's for breakfast. Yeah, same thing as yesterday. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. And so when did the inspiration for Knock Magazine happen? When did you meet Olivier to come up with this concept?
So I think it must have been like almost 4 years ago now. I got an email out of the blue that was called Message from the Past in English and everything. And it was this guy I hadn't talked to in at least 15 years, Olivier, who we'd met briefly once in the offices of a different role-playing game company. And we chatted because I was doing that line of D20 fantasy adventures and the setting that went with it, and he told me he liked it, and I said, do you want to write for it? He said yes, and he ended up writing in 2, 3 or 4 of the books, but 20 ended, so we lost touch entirely, and he told me that he'd stopped even playing role-playing games after that, and he'd, like maybe a year or 2 prior to this, he'd fallen back into the OSR because, I don't know, because of the blogs he could find, I guess. If you're a bit curious and want to know more stuff and are not going to do your research on YouTube, I think, especially at the time, the OSR was there because there was so much of it. Anyway, veering back into your question, he sent me that email saying, "Hey, I have an idea for a magazine." He said a revue, which is like probably the same word as review, but that's a word for a kind of a luxury magazine in French. That doesn't have such a fast periodicity and might not have news or perishable content in it. And he had that idea of taking some of the old stuff that he could find on blogs, maybe find others. And he'd seen that I was kind of involved in the scene, and said I should be the one to be the editor. And since he's a genius layout and graphic designer, it happened, but it took 2 years because we had day jobs that we needed to do, and we kind of forgot about it. And once in a while, I get an email with like a larger and larger PDF, and I'm like, oh, this is really going to happen. Maybe I should, try and talk to such and such about giving us one of their articles. So,
what was the selection process like? Because you had years of blog posts to kind of probably flag and bookmark that you were like, I like this, and to go back upon that. And what was the selection process as far as, did you sit down and decide like this goes in, this goes out, and who did you contact?
I wouldn't be able to remember who I contacted first, but we had this huge list. I had stuff. Olivier sent me like a huge file with like sometimes some preferences. I really want to have this guy, and it was important that we would get people with a little bit of name recognition. So we probably started with them, but the plan has always been to get as much content as we can, text-wise, then lay it out, get some art, and as soon as we have around 250 pages, we see what's in, we see what's out, and then we make the magazine. And it's getting better and better because we probably have half of issue 4 already, and I haven't looked at Nock stuff since we released 3. So
one of the things that struck me was, I mean, I would categorize it as a zine, but I mean, it's like 220-ish pages for each one, and that's not small. It's not kind of a zine size. Did you always intend it to be that big, that large of a volume?
Yeah, I think so. There's a limit in weight. It has to be under 500 grams so that it can be posted with the very generous, but sometimes random. It's a culture. It's books and magazines tariff that the French Post does, which is like 20% of what anything else of the same weight would cost. But if it's over 500 grams, then your shipping goes up, I don't know, tenfold probably. So no, it was the idea, like the initial email says something like it's going to be huge and it's going to be overwhelming, and so you will have to keep it by your set that's by the fire, and it will take months to digest, and this is what we want to do, which I thought was a great idea, but it's entirely Olivier's concept. Like, I cannot take any credit on that. I can actually take very little credit of the whole thing, about the whole thing, because the way it looks, I have nothing to do with. A lot of the articles he insisted on putting in. So yeah, I'm the little hands making sure that we have text and there aren't too many typos.
Who came up with the bric-a-brac terminology?
Hard to say.
I really like it. And so, in, I guess, Western culture, we'd call it knickknacks or whatever, but I had to kind of I wanted to research where that terminology actually was rooted in. And according to Wikipedia, is French origin, used in the Victorian era for a collection of curiosities. And I can't think of a better term for Nock. It's just exactly that.
I was unaware of that, but yeah, it's still used in French. Bric-a-brac is, yeah, it's a mess of stuff, and there's probably something good in it, but you can't really tell from a distance.
Yeah. And there's so many contributors, but I'm just going to list a few off for our listeners. So there's Gabor Lux, Dyson Logos, Arnold K from Goblin Punch, Emmy Allen from Cave Girl Games, and Diogo Nogueira from Old Skull publishing, and I mean that's just a few of kind of some more recognizable names. And when I read Knock One, and this is my first, when I read it, the first thing I said is, how are they going to do number two? Like, they used up so much good content in number one. Are they going to have any for number two? But you guys blew it out of the water again. You did a really good job on number two.
There's always more. We also get more submissions that haven't been published or are recent blog posts from people that sometimes we know, sometimes we've been contributors before, but sometimes they're just like new people in the industry. So the proportion has kind of moved. There was very little new content in the first issue. In the third, there's probably like 30%. I never counted. But I am sure that if I go back to our original list, which I will do for issue 4, I'll find some really, really interesting, like those little gems that are sleeping in the dusty archives of the internet from 2010. And I'm not worried, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're obviously doing a good job. So if I look at your stats from Kickstarter, your first one that happened in November 2020, you had 1,600 backers. And that one, I think you mentioned it took about 2 years to kind of bring to fruition, but it was not full time. And then with that success, Knock number 2 was kickstarted in May 2021, and you had 3,000 backers. So you more than doubled your backers. So word had gotten out. And that took you about 6 months to create.
Yeah.
And then finally, Knock number 3, this last February, another 3,000 backers, and shows no signs of letting up. And I know you're just starting to ship that out now, the print versions of it.
Yeah, I hope everyone has it by now, because it's been a couple of months. But
when you look back upon that progression, is it surprising to you that you achieved that kind of success?
I had no idea, like neither of us. We were talking to each other saying, okay, 500 would be great because we would probably make some money on the print run. 1,000 would be amazing. And yeah, it looks like our niche within the niche of the hobby is either growing or much bigger than we thought.
And speaking of the OSR and the niche, like why, like kind of what's your take on where it's going? Like, because it is, I think it's expanding, and I think you're getting some 5e players that are kind of starting to discover it. What's your thoughts on where the future lies for OSR?
I don't know, man. I'm not a thinker of that kind of stuff. It looks like it's expanding in different directions. Like we see very, I don't want to say nostalgic because it's not always a good word. Stuff that adheres to the old school rules, and I'm talking about the game rules, but also stuff that looks like old stuff. But we have people who make games that are entirely out there in terms of setting and rules. People are mixing a lot of stuff, like there's story games or more narrative games bits that come into the OSR, and there's OSR stuff that moves over there as well. The Sword Queen, I'm not going to remember her name. I think her name is Ray, or their name is Ray. Released like an OSR-inspired cyberpunk game like 2 weeks ago, about going into this alternate reality, like a Matrix kind of world, to destroy an AI and become one of them. And they say, yeah, it's an OSR game. I took the rules from an OSR setting, and is it really does it matter? I don't really know. And then you see what the Markborg people are doing, and like Orgborg and Cyborg. I'm very much waiting for them to appear on my doorstep. Yeah, I don't think there is an OSR anymore, to be honest. Except maybe, you know, in one little corner of the woods where they don't let anyone come in, and they want to be the defenders of the OSR. But I think we're kind of seeping everywhere and taking influences from everywhere. So I think we're all going in a lot of good directions.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time in the indie game design world, or at least from my perspective, it is. And that's partly why, you know, I run this podcast, is to profile some indie designers, because I just find the creativity fascinating. And so if you don't mind, maybe I'll ask you some questions just about the actual production of the magazine, because a lot of my viewers are into becoming indie game designers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mind me delving into some of that. So the artwork, the cover artwork, the two monster faces in Knock 1 and 2 by Tim Malloy, illustrated covers, like when did that decision get made for those monster faces? Because they're so iconic now that I think in Knock 3, when you didn't have a face, people were like, what happened? I love the face.
Yeah, I know. I've heard something like that. A lot of those questions I'm probably not going to be able to answer in detail, but that's a decision that Olivier took. He spends a lot of time looking at our portfolios and following people on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. So he sent me a few mock-ups early on, and that's what I was sending to prospective contributors to get to make them interested. But there was nothing like that. And then, yeah, one day, all of a sudden, those two art pieces existed before. I don't think they'd been published in print anywhere, but they'd been published online, and it felt like a very striking. Obviously it worked. But yeah, we decided to go in a different direction for the second year. So you'll get more adventurers doing something stupid at the end of the year.
And it doesn't take away from Knock 3, which has the cover by Bruno Prosecco, who also like is a great illustrator artist as well. It's just not the monster face that I think people had come to kind of expect, but still beautiful covers.
Maybe next year, I don't know.
And when you might not be able to answer this as far as the layout goes, but I'm out of curiosity, how much do the artists influence each page? And because it's a bric-a-brac and it's like influences from all over the place, how much do the artists do the layout versus Olivier do the layout versus you editing their content and that kind of thing? How does that workflow happen?
Yeah, Olivier does everything. I've got submissions a couple of times that were already laid out, and I told the author. It's been like I think both times it was another illustrator that was the same person, and I had to tell them we won't be able to do that because he does what he wants. Yeah, originally the layout was going to be more classical, more normal. But Olivier wasn't, and to me it looked great, but he wasn't very satisfied with it. And at some point, probably late one night in his barn, he lives in the mountains of the Basque Country, a place I've never even been to, I'm afraid. Yeah, he decided to break it. That's the word he used. He decided to break the layout and then started doing things. And sometimes some writers have complained about the fact that the font size changes in the middle of the page and it looks a bit weird. But I think it gives the page character.
Yeah, well, it's similar to, say, Mork Borg, which I know people have similar complaints about in some respects, but then other people go, it's beautiful. Like it's interesting and it captivates me. And Knock coincided kind of in and around the same time as Mork Borg, so there must have been some kind of cohesion of thought of how to zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
And then you mentioned Olivier is in Basque, and I also saw that you printed there as well, which is, perhaps unusual in some respects, because everybody's always trying to looking at reducing costs. And obviously sometimes people think, well, my first reaction is to go to China or something like that. But does he have a relationship, or you have a relationship with the printers there?
No, so Olivier had started doing magazines. He had a magazine before Nokia. It's called Battles. It's a wargaming magazine that won a few awards, and that's how he convinced me, basically, because being great at art direction doesn't mean you have the chops to be a proper publisher and businessman, because I'm neither myself, so I would understand it. And he was working with a publisher, I think in Latvia, but he's not from the Pays Basque, but he moved there maybe 10 years ago, and thought that maybe why not ask people on the other side of the mountains in Spain, and he found a really good house that does really good work for a little bit more money. I think it costs us €1 extra, something like that. It doesn't mean that it will ship faster, because somehow it has to go through Madrid to come back north and cross the Pyrenees, but it's worth it, really.
Well, it's probably nicer to have, that friendly face, and that you can actually see them, or talk to them a little bit closer. And and then the next thing is like the distribution part of it, which I think is a challenge for a lot of small indie publishers. It could mean the difference between success and failure of your project in general. You could sell 1 million copies, but if you're losing money on the distribution and the printing and that kind of thing. So how have you found that, as far as, like, do you guys have a warehouse that you do all the shipping from, or have you outsourced that?
It's in the barn. Again, I've never been there, but Olivier he was doing that before, and we're lucky again to be from a country that values culture. So far, it might change at some point, but shipping was going to not be ruinous, and then it's just a matter of having enough envelopes. And what Olivier does is he hires his neighbors and friends, get paid probably not entirely legally, to help for a few days, and then it's out. But on issue 2, we had a big problem between the pandemic and the summer. The French Postal Service lost 600 envelopes, which they never admitted to anything. So that huge bag, that huge postal bag, was never found. So that cost us a bit of extra money. But now everything is trackable. That costs everyone an extra €1, but at least if they lose things, they'll pay us back.
And have you found using Kickstarter? Obviously, you've used it 3 times now. Is it working for you, or have you guys explored? Because I think there's I forget the name of it, but there's like that new startup, or like crowdfunding for the GameStop. I can't. Sorry if I don't forget it.
Game on tabletop.
Yeah.
You mean? Yeah, yeah, they're French. They are. They've been set up by one of probably our biggest publisher. Like 5 people in an office. Might be 6 by now. I'm not sure. I haven't seen them in a while. Yeah, I think Kickstarter, given the fact that we're dealing with an international audience, is still the best bet for us. And there might be ethical reasons at some point why we would want to leave them, but I hope it doesn't get there because yeah, it does absolutely everything in terms of marketing for you. So. And their suggestion algorithm is getting better and better. I keep like every time I get, and the gods know if I get a lot of notifications and updates from a lot of companies that I follow. Every time at the bottom there's 3 suggestions. There's 2 I want. It's unending.
And what do you see as the future? Like, is Knock able to be a full-time job without prying too much into your life? Is that your goal to do it full-time, or are you able to right now?
Yeah, at the moment I'm working 1 day a week on my day job. It was 2 day a week until a month ago, and I was able to so it's an actual day job. It's just 1 day. Terrible that joke, sorry. Yeah, at the moment it's been great. It's been like probably the most money I've ever seen doing role-playing games, including the time when I had a salary. So far so good. Knocking on wood and everything. And yeah, if there are other things that we can do that will interest our readers, we'll be happy to provide.
Do you still have that desire to like make your own game, or is Knock now your baby that you just want to see moving forward?
No, I never stop making games. It's a problem. I have a number of unpublished games that I sometimes move bits of into the new game. There's something I'm working on. It's very early, and I can't really. I'm not going to talk about it much. That I'm talking to Olivier regularly, hoping that maybe we can make it. I'm trying to fill a niche that doesn't really exist. Instead of doing another. I mean, I could do another clone or hack of something. I want to do that every other week. But yeah, I find it, I don't know, somehow making game systems is more interesting to me than making settings. I don't know why.
And I guess like closing off now on our time together, if somebody wanted to contribute on your website, maybe you could just kind of give the pitch on how people can share their work and maybe be involved in Knock number 4 and onward.
Send me an email, people. The address is knockmag, one word, at pm.me. Yeah, and whether you've been writing before, whether you're an old grog nerd like us, but especially if you're not an old grog nerd like us, send stuff and I'll tell you what I think. And if I can see any potential for us to publish, I will help you make it better, and hopefully we'll get you within our pages.
Well, that's great. And I just want to, say thank you for your time today, sharing the story behind Knock.
My pleasure.
Really amazing product. I think when I think of the OSR, like that's the kind of the pitch that I would ever use is I'd hand somebody the OS or Knock magazine and go, this is the OSR. What do you think? Because I think it's so intriguing for them to kind of see the different viewpoints of the niche.
That is high praise. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, once again, just I want to say thank you to you and Olivier for bringing this to the world and sharing the OSR and promoting it in a really positive way.
You're very welcome. We'll keep doing it as long as people want it.